The physics was...
Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran says it has launched a massive wave of drone strikes targeting Israel and US military bases in the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait. Iranian state media says the attacks targeted facilities including Al Minad Air Base in the UAE and a strategic site in Israel as the war enters its second week. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it is watching for any US Navy move to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz as the regional war disrupts shipping. Warning comes after Washington said it may protect commercial vessels in the strategic waterway, which carries a large share of the world's oil trade. President Donald Trump calls for Iran's unconditional surrender in a major escalation 1 week after the United States and Israel began military operations. The statement comes as diplomatic mediation is discussed, even while new missile and air attacks continue across the region. Israel launches heavy air raids on Hezbollah controlled southern districts of Beirut in a campaign that has killed more than 200 people and displaced hundreds of thousands. The military issued evacuation warnings before targeting areas it describes as key Hezbollah strongholds in the Lebanese capital. Burning aircraft and thick smoke are seen at Tehran's Mehrabad airport after reported bombardment at Iran's main domestic aviation hub. The incident follows announcement of a wider offensive aimed at Iranian military and defense infrastructure. Russian President Vladimir Putin expresses support for an immediate ceasefire during a call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. The Kremlin says Moscow is urging a return to diplomatic talks as fighting continues between Iran, Israel, and US forces. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Washington is monitoring reports that Moscow may be sharing intelligence with Tehran. He says developments are being factored into American military planning during the current regional conflict. Saudi Arabia says its defences intercepted 6 drones heading towards a major oil field and a ballistic missile targeting a military facility. Authorities say the projectiles were aimed at the Sheba energy site and Prince Sultan Air Base, which has hosted US Air Force operations. And for your top stories this hour, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has stated that Iran has not targeted its friendly neighbouring countries, but has focused its military action on US military bases, facilities and installations in the region. In a series of tweets, Pezeshkian has emphasized Iran's commitment to self-defense, asserting that the country will resist any form of aggression until the last breath. He clarified that Iranian's defensive operations are strictly aimed at targets associated with aggressive actions against the Iranian nation, considering them legitimate targets. Pezeshkian has further highlighted Iran's long-standing commitment to fostering good relations with its regional neighbours, based on mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, he reaffirmed Iran's right to defend itself against military aggression from the United States and Israel. We're now being joined by Borzu Daragahi, who is an Iranian-American journalist and founder of Badlands newsletter, joining us from Istanbul. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. So, as we've heard from Iran's president, that he's avoided targeting neighbouring countries and has instead focused on US military bases in the region. How credible is this distinction between defensive retaliation and escalation, and how might regional actors interpret this message?
Well, it's somewhat credible. Most of the targets in the Gulf area, in the Arabian Peninsula, and in addition to that, those targets that we originally heard about at hotels and so on, well, it turns out that the American officers and CIA operatives were sheltering in those hotels. So arguably that is a legitimate target. But absolutely, this is reordering the
We're just so sorry. We're just cutting live now quickly to Trump's speech, who is speaking to Latin America's leaders. So we're just going to quickly cut live to that and listen in.
Pretty wild time, but it's going very well. Sit down, please. And tremendous progress has been made, as you're probably seeing just by watching. We're doing something. I built the military and rebuilt it and made it really strong in my first administration, along with a lot of other things we did. We had a great first term. And now we're using it. Unfortunately, we have to. But you're seeing how great it is. There's no military like it on earth, not even close. And we're doing very well in Iran. You see the result. And it's been amazing. We've knocked out 42 Navy ships, some of them very large, in 3 days. That was the end of the Navy. We knocked out their Air Force. We knocked out their communications, and all telecommunications is gone. I don't know how they communicate, but I guess they will figure something out. It's not working out too well. And they're bad people. They're just bad people. When you look at October 7th and beyond October 7th, look at all the killing that they've done over the years, for 47 years. And this had to be done. They were very close to a nuclear weapon. They would have had one if we didn't do our B-2 hit, Midnight Hammer. They would have had it 8 months ago. They would have had a nuclear weapon, and, you know, they're crazy, and they would have used it. So we did the world a favor. And they said, well, how are you doing on a scale of 0 to 10? How are you doing with the attack? And I said, about a 15, I would say, with 10 being the best. But it's something that had to be done, and we're doing it well. And I want to thank everybody involved. I'll be going right after this. I'll be leaving for Dover, very sad situation, to greet the families of the heroes coming home from Iran, coming home in a different manner than they thought they'd be coming home. But they're great heroes in our country, and we're going to keep it that way. There's always, when it comes to war, there's always that. But we're going to keep it to a minimum, I think, Pete, and going to be something, a service that we're really providing, not for the Middle East, but for the world. These were sick people, very sick people. This morning, I'm honored to welcome distinguished heads of state from across the Western Hemisphere for the first Shield of the Americas Summit. And it's something very, very special. Marco's been working on it very hard, so have a lot of other people, because it's a very important place for us. It's nice to be home. It's very, very important. You know, we go all over the world, 9,000 miles away, 12,000 miles away. I said, how long is this flight? Sir, this flight is 19 hours. I said, oh, that's great. I said, now I have flights that last for 2 hours. I like that better. Much better. But on this historic day, we come together to announce a brand new military coalition to eradicate the criminal cartels plaguing our region. And you have a lot of it. One of the things when we were talking backstage, you were telling me the crime, the cartels, and we're knocking the hell out of them where we can. We're going to go heavier You saw what we were doing with the boats coming in. The boats, there's not a lot of people coming in by boats anymore. We knocked down drugs coming in by sea. Drugs coming in through water is down 96%. We're trying to find out who the other 4% are, because I think they're the bravest people in the world. Either that or they don't watch television, right? They're either very brave or they're not watching. But we're calling this military partnership the America's Counter Cartel Coalition. And that's what you need. You have cartels. They seem to grow in this region unbelievably rapidly. It has to do with drugs largely. Earlier this week here in Miami, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who's right here. Pete, you're fantastic, doing a great job. We're proud of you. And representatives of 17 different nations formally entered this new alliance. The heart of our agreement is a commitment to using lethal military force to destroy the sinister cartels and terrorist networks once and for all. We'll get rid of them. We need your help. You have to just tell us where they are. We have amazing weaponry, as you probably noticed over the last short period of time. But I want to thank members of the coalition, most of whom are friends of mine. Few of them I just met, but most of whom are friends, many of whom I endorsed. And they took that endorsement and they went on to win big. I haven't had a bad endorsement yet, right? Yeah. He says, yes. He was happy. He was a couple of points down and went up like a rocket ship, right, in Argentina. But the president of Argentina is here, Javier Milei. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. President of El Salvador, another friend, Nayib Bukele. You know, he is a man who we've gotten very close to. I saw him as a young man my first time. You were young and handsome. Now you're older and handsome. You're older and handsome. But he runs a good operation. That's all I care about, right? When I first saw him, I said, he's too young. And then I saw the job he did. I said, well, I guess he's not too young, because I was young and did well. But you've been a great president, and we appreciate the relationship very much. President of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, thank you very much. Thank you very much. President of Ecuador, Danielle Noboa. Danielle, thank you. Thank you, Danielle. President of Panama, I love that canal. Jose, I think he made the greatest deal in history. He bought it for $1. One of our brilliant presidents. I can't sleep over that deal. They gave it to him for $1. Jose Raul Molino, where's, you know, you made one of the greatest real estate deals in history. Jimmy Carter, one of our great presidents. President of Honduras, Tito Asfora. Thank you, Tito. Thank you very much. Great to see you the other day. President of Guyana, Irfan Ali. Thank you. President of Bolivia, Rodrigo Paz. Thank you very much. Great people. Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I have to be very careful with this because, you know, your first name is very similar to a first name that we have, but fortunately it's pronounced different. It's Kamala. It's supposed to Kamala. I like Kamala better in many ways. And I just want to say thank you very much, but I had to be careful with that first name. I didn't want to get it mixed up because it would ruin your reputation completely. Right? I said, is this the same pronunciation? No, sir, it's a little different. It's Cam, right? Cam, as opposed to Cam. We don't like Cam. President of Costa Rica, Rodrigo Chavez, as well as the President-elect of Costa Rica, Laura Fernandez Delgado. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And the President of the Dominican Republic, Luis Abinader. And so many of my friends are in the Dominican, including the Sugar King, right?
We have just heard from Trump there, speaking to the Latin American leaders. We're now going to go back to Bozu. Thank you for coming back here and speaking with us on this. As we've just heard, Trump has just said Iran could have had nuclear weapons, but we just aren't too sure of that yet. Do you think that's a clear message where he's sort of saying that he never really knew? Or is it that he felt like what he had to do, he had to do?
I think we're actually pretty sure if we even look at the National Intelligence Estimate, which is the Director of National Intelligence annual summaries of the threats that the U.S. faces. This is a summary of all of the many three-letter agencies in the United States of the intelligence community. They categorically said that although Iran is having its enrichment and enriching uranium to a higher and higher degree, it has not yet made, very key, and they've said it repeatedly, Iran has not yet made a political decision to pursue a nuclear weapon, even though it could, if it possibly wanted to. And the time frame for that varies from like a year to ultimately having a nuclear weapon to like 2 or 3 years, because Iran has never pursued, not since 2003 at least, so more than 20 years, the key element of miniaturization and weaponization of that enriched uranium.
Thank you. Please stay with us. We're now just going to quickly go to Professor Rowan. Thank you for joining us here for this breaking news. As we've also just heard, that there was a report that said that Iran had, I think, 30% less enriched uranium than what they actually needed to build a nuclear weapon. And obviously Trump was saying the whole time that they do have it and we need to eliminate them because they can't use them. Again, what are your thoughts on this? Because now he's just said that they could have had, he just never knew it that they did.
President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu has given 3 principal reasons for targeting the Iranian regime. The first is, of course, they are concerned that Iran was on the route to develop a functional nuclear weapon. Steve Witkoff himself, during the indirect negotiations with the Iranians, mediated by Oman, said that the Iranians said that they have sufficient enriched uranium to build a functional nuclear weapon. This remains a matter of debate, matter of discussion, but I think that the world should not take a chance, because Iran has for many years funded, trained and supported a number of very dangerous terrorist and insurgent groups, the Lebanese Hezbollah, the Ansarullah, and of course other Sunni and Shia groups such as Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian Mujahideen brigades, and conducted a number of terrorist attacks from Australia to Sri Lanka to the United States. So I think that all these led to the joint US-Israeli operations to decapitate the Iranian leadership and decimate the rank and file of the IRGC.
And I'm just going to go back as well to Bozu. Thank you for staying with us for this. As we have also heard Trump say in his speech that they have knocked out 42 Iranian ships, saying we knocked out their Navy and Air Force. As we are finished, well, we've just come to the end of the first week for this conflict. How do you think in the next coming days or weeks are going to turn out now?
Well, first of all, I would say that Iran never had much of a navy to start with. It was never a naval power. It has never been a naval power, not in centuries, definitely not in recent decades. So taking out the Navy is no big deal. The big question is how much of Iran's capacity for launching missiles has it taken out, has the U.S. taken out? And it seems like there has been some degradation, but some of those missile sites and production facilities are buried deep underground. And that's the other question. And then the third issue is the drones. Iran's drones are the key aspect of its asymmetrical warfare strategy. They're doing a lot of damage. You had a situation in which a $30,000 drone did serious damage or destroyed a major $1 billion U.S. satellite and communications installation in Doha. So these are wreaking havoc on American infrastructure at this point. They're using them in Jordan. They're using them in the Gulf. They've used them possibly in Cyprus as well. These are the main issues.
Really sorry, I think we've just lost you there. Professor Rowan, we're just coming back to you now. As we know, as I've just also said, that we have now come to the end of the first week of this conflict. Trump has said that they have about 5 and 6 weeks in them. Iran also released a video showing their military equipment underground and what they've got. In the next coming days, as we've also heard, Iran's president saying that they don't want to target their neighbouring countries. How do you think this conflict's now going to go, with especially Iran's president coming out and saying that, and Trump saying that they have knocked out Iranian ships?
Iran has suffered very significantly, both in land and out at sea. But when you look at the numbers, Iran has a total of 850,000 IRGC personnel and huge infrastructure, some of which is based underground. So I do not think that they can end this war successfully in the next 2 to 3 weeks. It is a war that will continue in the long term. So I think that the Middle Eastern countries, including the Gulf states, should prepare for long-term conflict and to protect themselves. With regard to the Iranian president's statements that they are not targeting the Gulf countries, well, I have seen that primarily their attacks were against the US military bases and also where US personnel stayed. But they have also killed and injured a number of civilians and deliberately attacked civilian targets. So I believe that the statement made by the Iranian president is not accurate. And what is important is for the Arab countries and for the Middle Eastern countries in the neighborhood of Iran should form a coalition now to ensure that the Iranian regime do not continue, because this regime will pose a very significant threat to the region and beyond. And the time has come for there to be a regime change. It will not happen in the short term. It will take many months, and it will happen in the long term, because most Iranians are very unhappy with the Iranian regime, especially after the regime elements killed perhaps between 10 to 30,000 protesters. So I believe that the current operations are enabling the Iranians to rise against the Iranian regime, which has been very brutal both to its own citizens and also conducting terrorist attacks, supporting terrorist groups, and building missile and fissile capabilities.
Thank you, Professor Rowan. Please don't go anywhere, as we'll be back with you very shortly. According to Lebanon's health ministry, the death toll from Israel's attacks on Lebanon since earlier this week has risen to 294. Meanwhile, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has issued a warning to the Lebanese government, stating that Israel has no territorial claims over Lebanon, but it will not tolerate any military action from Lebanese territory against Israel. Katz has emphasised that Israel will also not allow a return to the past situation of attacks from Lebanon, urging the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah before Israel takes further action. Let's listen in to some of his statements.
אני רוצה להעביר כאן מסר לנשיא לבנון האו"ם. לבנון היא לא מהאו"ם. אתה התחייבת ואתם התחייבתם לקיים את ההסכם ולפרוק את החיזבאללה מנשקו. והדברים האלה לא קורים. וכרגע אנחנו לא נאפשר פגיעה ביישובים שלנו, לא נאפשר פגיעה בחיילים שלנו. ואם הדברים עומדים ויעמדו אחד מול השני, מי שישלם את מלוא המחיר זה ממשלת לבנון ולבנון כולה. אנחנו לא נאפשר לחיזבאללה לפעול מתוך כל התשתיות של שטח לבנון כדי לפגוע באזרחים, לפגוע בחיילים, ולכן אם לא תאכפו ואם הברירה תהיה הגנת אזרחינו ושלום חיילינו או מדינת לבנון, אנחנו נבחר בהגנה על אזרחינו ועל חיילינו, וממשלת לבנון ולבנון ישלמו מחיר כבד ביותר.
The Israeli military campaign began after Hezbollah fired at Israel on Monday, dragging Lebanon into the larger regional conflict, causing hundreds of thousands of Lebanese to flee their homes. Additionally, more buildings in the Hezbollah-controlled southern suburbs of Beirut were left in devastation today morning, following heavy Israeli bombardment, after an evacuation order was issued for civilians. We're now being joined back by Professor Rowan. Thank you for joining us back here and staying with us for this. As we've just heard, the Lebanon's health ministry reported nearly 300 deaths from Israeli strikes this week. How does this escalation reshape the already fragile security balance along the Israel-Lebanon border, and what risks does it now pose for a broader regional conflict?
Ellie, as you mentioned, on March 2nd, the Lebanese Hezbollah fired into Israel, and they conducted this attack in support of the Iranian regime. And of course, Israel has now responded with overwhelming force to decimate the rank and file of the Lebanese Hezbollah and decapitate its current leadership. And it is so important for the Lebanese authorities, the Lebanese president and prime minister, to dismantle the Lebanese Hezbollah. Of course, Hezbollah is a very strong force of about 30 to 40,000 members, but Lebanon will have no peace, and the region will have no peace until and unless this group is dismantled. If we all look at the history since October 23rd, 1983, the Lebanese Hezbollah attacked the US Marine barracks and the French paratrooper headquarters, killing 241 American personnel and 58 French military personnel. So America and Europe will work with Israel to empower the Lebanese military to contain, isolate, and dismantle the Lebanese Hezbollah. As you mentioned, there will be very significant regional issues if Lebanese Hezbollah continues. This is the best time for the Western world and the Arab world to work together to ensure that this group cease to exist, because this group won't do any good for either Lebanon or for the region.
Thank you so much for joining us here today, Professor Rowan. It's lovely speaking with you. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have claimed responsibility for targeting a Marshall Islands flagged oil tanker in the Persian Gulf as the conflict between Iran, Israel and the United States escalates. The Guards have identified the targeted tanker as the Louise P., describing it as one of the assets of the United States. The attack was carried out using a drone in the middle of the Gulf. This incident marks a significant development, with Iran taking aim at shipping as part of its military response in the region. We have further updates. The US State Department has announced that it has completed more than a dozen charter flights and successfully evacuated thousands of Americans from the Middle East. These flights are part of a larger effort to bring US citizens to safety amid the escalating tensions in the Middle East region. And next up, Turkey is considering sending F-16 fighter jets to northern Cyprus amid escalating tensions in the Middle East, according to Defense Ministry sources. The move comes as a part of a broader strategy to strengthen Turkey's military presence in the region in response to growing security threats. If carried out, this deployment would further heighten fragile relations with Greece and Cyprus, as well as add to the volatile situation in the eastern Mediterranean. Turkey's decision could have far-reaching implications for regional stability. Turkey's President Erdogan has also called for dialogue on Iran if a phone call with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Erdogan has stressed diplomatic efforts and warned that continued interventions could harm regional stability. If Turkey moves forward with sending F-16s to the northern Cyprus, it will mark a significant escalation in the region's already tense military dynamics. We have some breaking news. My colleague and senior editor Uday Pratap Singh has spoken to Melissa Conley-Tyler, who's an honorary fellow at the University of Melbourne, about the future of India-Australia ties, the evolution of the Quad and the economic partnership between both countries. They also discussed Australia's position on the Middle East conflict. All this and more at the Raisina Dialogue being held in India's capital, New Delhi. Take a look.
Conley-Tyler, Honorary Fellow of University of Melbourne, Asia Institute, here on the sidelines of the Raisina Dialogue 2026. Thank you very much for speaking with NewsX and welcome to India.
Thank you. Well, this is actually, I think, my 11th Raisina Dialogue. I've been here from the very first, and it's been fascinating for me to see how the debate has changed over time around India's place in the world and Indian foreign policy, and of course seeing the way that the Australia-India relationship has blossomed over that time.
Let's just delve straight into that then. The Australia-India partnership, where do you see ties headed, in which direction post 2026?
Well, look, I think it's a multi-factor relationship. At the government level, it's extremely strong. So I'm thinking it might have been a couple of years ago at the Raisina Dialogue, we sent our Secretary of the Department of Defence, our Chief of Defence Forces and our Director General of National Intelligence. I mean, about as high level as you can possibly imagine. So at the government level, so much is happening. There's been a session here looking at the potential for defence technology, an area that both Australia and India are very interested in, and I know the High Commission here is really looking what more can be done. But I suppose from my perspective, I work a lot on a much more whole-of-nation idea of foreign policy. And in that, it's not just about governments. It's also about the people-to-people links. So here, as always, is Lisa Singh from the Australia-India Institute, for example. And the sort of work we can do at a people-to-people, at a cultural, at a sport, at a media, there are so many things we can be doing. Education is an area that I'm particularly focused on at the moment, based at the University of Melbourne, as I am, and the way that those educational links turn into longer term links. Now, I suppose from my side, I'm not sure if I could say civilizational links, because I'm not sure Australia's quite thinks of ourselves that way. But that, I think, is what we need, the generational links across our countries over the long term.
We did see, in the recent times, a signing of finalization of a trade agreement with your neighbor, New Zealand. In terms of the trade partnership, what's the outlook looking like, and could we hopefully have a free trade agreement with Australia too?
Well, we have an economic partnership, which is sort of pretty close to the same thing. I mean, there are discussions about how much we can enhance that over time, and I'm sure we will keep enhancing that over time. But I think that in itself was a big achievement. There had been a lot of roadblocks in terms of how India and Australia saw trade, and I think having that economic partnership was a great step forward. So I think that's a possibility. I mean, for trade, you have to find complementarities, and there are some, no question. A lot of them will be in new technology. I think the complementarities are really strong in the security side, where we both see the world as difficult, contested. We see that it is good to have friends in such a world, and from Australia's perspective, we see India as such an important partner in managing.
Where do you see those security and defense ties headed then between our countries? And also, we are part of the broader Quad as well. Where do you see the Quad headed as well? We are awaiting a visit by President Trump, possibly to this part of the world, when we will have a Quad summit physically as well, hopefully soon.
No, and look, that'll be fascinating. I think it is hard to know how the Quad will develop under the second Trump administration. Now, obviously, it was a first Trump administration initiative, and that helps. So it is not going to be jettisoned entirely. But trying to guess exactly how the US is going to treat this, and of course, US-India relationships have been more challenged under the second Trump administration. So I think the Quad, it will be interesting to see what it can do. But that doesn't stop Australia and India doing lots of things bilaterally. And I see that every year. I see, that there are exercises we now do together. Australia is back in Malabar. I mean, there are all sorts of things that every year we're doing more and more. And I expect that trajectory to continue. I don't think we'll see, a major announcement, because we've already made so many announcements. I think it's really just a matter of continuing off that fantastic base.
Finally, coming to the Middle East conflict, which of course everyone is talking about as well at this conference, what kind of position is Australia taken on the Middle East conflict, and how prolonged do you really see things as an analyst yourself?
I think it's difficult for Australia. We have a strong commitment to international law, and we try very hard to encourage great powers, all great powers, to abide by international rules and norms. I don't think any analyst would look at the second Trump administration and say that that's a big focus of the way they see the world. I don't think they look at those international rules and norms. So Australia's in a somewhat difficult position. We probably don't want to directly criticise the US. The US is a major partner, but I'm sure we have some qualms about what's happening. So our Prime Minister has made, I think, a very anodyne statement to say, well, we'd all prefer that Iran didn't have nuclear weapons. And I think that's true. We all would prefer Iran didn't have nuclear weapons. But I think there's a lot more that could be said about what's happening in the Middle East.
How long do you believe the conflict now is expected to last? Do you see a prolonged conflict, looking at the way the Iran retaliation has also happened, which perhaps the US and Israelis did not initially expect, the way that the Gulf states have also been targeted, and Australia also has a lot of diaspora there, as does India, in the Middle East. Yes. So how do you see this conflict really panning out? How prolonged do you expect it to be? And also, are there any end goals, any end games for when the war will stop, and who will declare victory when?
Well, that is the difficulty, because when you go into a conflict without a clear mission and a clear idea of when it will end, who knows? So at this point, the US could at any point say, we have achieved our objective. Now, I mean, the way I read US objectives, if I'm looking back at, say, the national security strategy, it was making sure that there is not a power that dominates a region and prevents the US exercising its interests. So I would have said a weak Iran achieves that objective. But what exactly is a weak Iran? Like, at what point have you actually reached that? And that I'm not so certain about. In that case, it may be the domestic political pressures are part of it. Can we declare victory and say we have done enough to weaken Iran that we can stop at this point? But I am not someone who's going to try and predict on that particular topic.
Well, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your trip to India.
Thank you.
Journalist Dinesh Uday Pratap Singh in Delhi, NewsX.